Sure about that?
It probably is.
It probably is.
Well, let's go to John 21. A lot of stuff to cover. There's a lot of stuff in the last chapter, I'll be honest with you. There's a lot to it. I'm glad the pastor went to 1 Peter today. Man, do we see a difference in that person than we do in what we've seen so far in John. But last week we looked at chapter 20, and I wanted you to kind of pay attention to some of the things that we looked at with surrounding Peter. Why am I saying that? Because 21 is all about Peter, other than a little bit about John, just a tiny bit. But most of it is just about the Apostle Peter. And this is the only gospel that really pays attention to or has an account of this meeting with Jesus and Peter. And it's an extremely important one. Or else the events of Acts don't make a lot of sense.
Right.
1 Peter, 2 Peter, they don't make a lot of sense unless you actually look at John 21. And then you're like, okay, I can kind of see where the road back started. And so, to kind of recap, chapter 20, the empty tomb is my heading here. So basically, we had Mary Magdalene going to the tomb, crying outside of it, weeping, seeing Jesus, and Jesus tells her that basically, paraphrasing, that he's alive, and go tell the disciples. And so she runs and tells the disciples. And this is what I wanted to kind of focus on: is who ran to the tomb? Remember, there was the other disciples there. It wasn't just Peter and John, but it was Peter and John that ran to the tomb. And we looked at last week how John outran him. He got to the tomb first, but he didn't go in. Remember that? When Peter came, he just marched right in. He looked at it, saw the linens in there, and just went straight in. So there is no denying that A, Peter has stuck around even after denying him. B, he loves the Lord. We're gonna see that. Jesus asks him 3 times in our lesson today, "Do you love me?" And we're gonna look at the differences between those words, because in the English it just doesn't bring it out, the differences. But what we see today is that Peter absolutely loves Jesus. There's no doubt about that, or else he would have made himself unavailable. He would have been somewhere other than the disciples, gathered with him. But he definitely is engaged here with the disciples. He still loves Jesus. There's no doubt about it. Now, there's some mending that needs to be done. There's some mending that needs to be done on his heart. But the core of Peter never left. It's broken a little bit, but it never left. And that's the beautiful thing about the Apostle Peter and about all the apostles, is that Jesus selected them because their core is good. And he knew that if he shared with them the wonderful things of the scriptures, just as we've been shared with, that their core wouldn't leave. And so that's what the scripture, I think, says, is that you train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he's not going to depart from it. And I'm believing that. It takes a lot of faith to believe that.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so that's kind of chapter 20. And what else do we see? Of course, we dealt with Thomas. Let's look at verse 30. He says, "And truly Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name." We looked at that last week. It's not just a belief. I love what Brother Poon said yesterday. He drew the difference, Tamara remembers, he drew the difference of his mom talked about, he talked about pets. His mom has pets, And over there in their culture, they don't have tables necessarily where they eat dinner and kitchen, the chairs off the ground, and none of that, right? Right, Brian? Mm-hmm. He said over there they cook on the ground, they sit on the ground, and that's how they eat. And he says between, they have a cat and a dog, and between, when she needs to go outside for a second, she's got boiling pots of whatever, just food sitting there. She trusts that dog to not touch the food, because the dog is told, commanded, don't touch the food. Kind of like on Old Yeller, the dog didn't touch the food even though he was being tempted with it, right? But she doesn't trust the cat. And so therefore, she literally has to pick the cat up, scoop it up, and walk outside with it. And that's really the difference. The difference, you know, between them isn't any different because she loves the animals the same way. She loves the cat, she loves the dog, but she doesn't trust the cat. See, his point is that we say that we love God, but do we trust in Him? There's a difference. Do we actually put our trust in Him, as opposed to just saying that we love Him? So, I like that analogy. That was wonderful.
This time period, I always picture this time period. I think the disciples were in a fog.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I picture this as real dark days for them.
Yeah.
They weren't really sure what was going on. I think they were still confused by the events. They weren't sure. They go to the tomb, He's not there. And even though He had appeared and all that, like, I don't know, like, this was sort of a foggy, real weird period for these guys. And so for Peter to just declare that he's going fishing, not to ruin it, but to just sort of declare that, seemingly after He appeared to them.
Yeah.
So like what is their direction? Like where are they headed? Like what are they supposed to be doing? I don't think they really knew. So I think this was a real confusing time for them. And I think this reset that Jesus is about to have is really what was needed to point them in the proper direction.
Yeah.
He told them, on this rock I'll build my church, all of that, but He needed to really point the leader of the group in the proper direction. And I think that's what we're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was just, because it's like not all of them are together, right? It's Peter and a few that are coming, and so it's like not all of them are together. It's just sort of a weird kind of confusing time.
Yeah, and it is. And we looked at that last week. It's like what are they doing? You know, and it's not that it's bad, but we looked at that 50 days between the time that Jesus was resurrected to the day of Pentecost. There's that 50-day period of like, Jesus is gone, He's making appearances and all that, but it's nothing consistent. It's nothing steady. It's nothing like it had been. It had been that they were traveling around together and they were able to see Him and listen to Him and all that. That's gone. Now He's making appearances just very sporadically up until the point, I think of His ascension, and then, and of course, this thing that we're going to look at today, this appearance. But prior to this, in chapter 20, we looked at they were just together in one room, and He just appears to them out of nowhere. Doors locked. Doesn't stay with them very long, I don't think, maybe a couple hours, and then disappears again. And so He did that 2 times. Of course, the first time He did it, they were all rushed over there and they were amazed and everything. Our Lord's alive. The second time is with Thomas, and telling Thomas, "Look, I am alive. Don't doubt it." Then chapter 21 now is the third time that He appears. And so in 21:1, He says, "After these things, Jesus showed Himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and in this way He showed Himself. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of His disciples were together." It doesn't list the other 2 disciples, but there's 7. 7 of the 11 are here, so 4 are gone. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." And I don't want to minimize what they're doing, but in the absence of not really knowing what to do, you do what's necessary. Isn't that true? You don't really know what to do. Well, then I'll do what I have to do. And they had to put food on the table. And that's, I used to think this was a referendum on His life. What do we get, I'm just going to go back to my old life. I don't really think that. I think His love for Jesus is still very strong. I think the apostles' love is very strong. I think that this is something that in the absence of not really knowing what to do, you do what you have to do. And I think that's really what He's saying here. He said, "I'm going fishing." Some people want to take it to the extreme of, "I'm going back to my old life." Some people say He just wants a bite to eat. Not to say that this wouldn't have turned into going back to fishing full time. Maybe with years or months, or maybe a whatever. I don't know. But like Philip said, they're kind of missing that direction that they'd had. They weren't the ones leading Jesus around for 3 years. Jesus was leading them around. And so we see that they've been missing their leader. And so now, when Peter says, "I'm going fishing," his influence over the rest of the disciples was evident. Because what did they say to him? They said to him, "We're going with you also. We don't have anything better to do, and we need food too." Most of them are trained on being fishermen. Some of them were, if Matthew was one of these, He was a tax collector. He didn't necessarily have training being a fisherman, but he could learn, on the job training. So he says, I'm going fishing. They said to him, we are going with you also. They went out, and immediately they got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. Now, I don't know if it was customary or not to go fishing at night, or if this was part of the thing where they were trying to kind of keep stuff under wraps too. Remember, they weren't just in a room by themselves. They were in a room with the door shut and locked. And that made the miracle that Jesus, when he appeared, that made it that much more of a miracle, was that he came in with the door locked. And I don't know if that was something that they did, or that's something that is kind of continuing on, this we're banding together, it's kind of us against them kind of mentality or something.
Yeah, I never thought of that until you mentioned that. I think it was last week. You also referenced that this wasn't necessarily a declaration that he was abandoning Jesus. I never thought of it that way, but I agree with you. I like that thought. I think there was still the need for Jesus, and we're going to see that in this upcoming conversation. He may not have abandoned him, but he needed to be restored. And so he says, I love, and we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think the core was definitely
Oh,
intact.
yeah.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I like that approach. Because I've preached that this was probably a mandate that he was just going to throw the whole thing away. But how could then he say to Jesus upcoming here, I love you? Right.
And it's not just words. We're going to see actions
Right.
too.
Yeah.
So we're going to see that. And the actions are, keep in mind, we're going to string his actions together that it makes just a little bit more sense. He ran to that tomb. He was with the disciples. Remember, this is a leader. This isn't somebody like Bartholomew. Bless his heart. He suffered greatly for the Lord, and he pushed the gospel forward. We don't know much about him, but we do know a lot about Peter. We just do, just the way that the Lord set it up. And with Peter, we see his actions are speaking very loudly. Yes, he denied the Lord. Yes, he had that moment where he wept bitterly. But it's the things he's done since, and that's what I wanted to focus on in chapter 20. He ran to the tomb, he's been there, he's present, he's making himself available, and he goes and he sees the linens himself. He's excited along with the rest of the 12 that said that they're glad when they saw the Lord in that room when the door was shut. And now we see he's just kind of sitting around again. They don't really know what to do. He says, let's just go fishing. Well, that night they caught nothing. Verse 4, it says, but when the morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore. Remember, John says here's another revelation of Jesus, as it were. That sounds probably pretty bad, doesn't it? This is another appearance of Jesus. Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Remember, this is going back to what we already talked about. Mary didn't know it was Jesus. What did he look like? We don't know. The disciples, he had to show the prints in his hands to the disciples. Thomas doubted it. What did he look like? The fact that they couldn't recognize him from it says they're not that far off the shore. So he didn't look like what they remembered. Just keep that in mind. But this is interesting what Jesus says to him. So Jesus now, it says he stood on the shore. I think that was just another miracle. I don't think he took, any kind of public transportation there. I think he's able just to appear, just like he did in the room. It says, then Jesus said to them, children, have you any food? They answered him, no. Now, we're not going to get into all the Greek here, because I don't know all the Greek. But what I do know in my little bit of study about this is that this was a very unusual question. The way that he worded this question was not a typical question. When he uses the word children, it's not your typical, hey, hey, you over there. It was an endearing term, and it would have, basically, bottom line, it would have sounded a little bit different to the apostles. It would have sounded like, who's saying that? So that would have gotten their curiosity piqued a little bit. And it would have been like, okay, that sounds a little strange. You've been in public or something, or you meet somebody for the first time or something, and they just use words that are just not normal for a stranger to use. You're kind of taken aback a little bit, like, you don't even know me, Why are you using those kind of, and we reserve certain words because we don't know people that are strangers. And so I think that this was kind of cutting through all that, hey, we're strangers. This is children. Have you found any food? Or do you have any food? And so they answered him no. And so this would have sounded a little bit different than a typical question coming from a stranger who they thought this was. And he said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. Now that's even stranger.
Yeah.
He's not saying, you know, Farmer's Almanac says that I'm pretty sure there's going to be some, why don't you just try the other side? You can't hurt. I'm hungry. I want to buy some fish. Can you just try the other side? No, he's not doing that. He is commanding them, and he is for sure this is going to work. Now, who in their lifetime, in the apostles' lifetime, was that sure of things? Only Jesus. Only Jesus. And he says, he didn't say if, he says, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. I think that command probably was like, okay, let's do it. They didn't hesitate, you can tell. It says, so they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. As in, the net that they had, I don't know what all that looked like, but the net that they had, all these grown men and experienced fishermen were not able to haul it in, as in, pick the net up and put it into the boat. As we can see later, they drag it. What do you do when you can't pick something up? You drag it, right? You're letting gravity and help you out a little bit. But they weren't able to pick that net up and put it into the boat. That's what they weren't able to do because it was so heavy. And now that's the third thing, right? Because we see the unusual question. We see the command that went out. And we see the result. That's three things. Now the disciples are thinking, wait a minute. Something's going on here. This feels very familiar to me. He says, therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved, John said to Peter, it is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard it, that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and he plunged into the sea. Actions are speaking much louder than words with Peter right now. Actions. When Mary Magdalene told him, the disciples, I've just seen the Lord. I don't know where they've laid, I don't know where they put his body. Peter ran to the tomb. When Peter knew, for the second that he knew that it was Jesus, he jumped into the sea. There is nobody else that jumped into the sea. Maybe they were concerned about the fish. Maybe they were concerned about bringing those to shore. Maybe they didn't want to get wet. Who knows? But Peter, in like fashion, in like personality, jumps into the sea, jumps into the water with his outer garment on. You would think you'd take that off and then jump into the sea. I don't think he wanted to meet Jesus in that condition. I think he wanted to meet him with, as clothed as he possibly could. And even if that meant it dragging him down as he's swimming to the shore, it didn't matter. Think about that. That's even more weight. That's even more of a drag, as it were, coming in to meet Jesus. But he did it anyway. This is his determination that we see that he wants to meet Jesus. And so his actions are speaking very loudly.
And I think it shows their personality too. It seems like John is pitching it up and Peter's hitting it.
Yeah.
Because it seems like John sprints to the tombs,
Yeah.
gets there first, but then Peter goes barging right in.
Yeah.
John is the one who announces, it is the Lord. And Peter, and the Bible specifically doesn't say that Peter gently kind of walked it into the water. He plunged into
Right.
the water. So it shows their personalities. It shows how different they are. I also thought, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I'm wondering if they're still hiding. Like, I mean, because they're in rooms, their doors are shut, doors are locked. I'm wondering if there was maybe some pursuit for who the rest, especially after the body was gone.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're starting to pursue these guys. And
They
so
could be.
I'm wondering if they're hiding, because just by preaching in Acts, they're arrested like that. But that's their first public showing.
Right.
I mean, they hadn't been seen in public prior to that. I mean, this is night fishing.
Yeah.
And as an avid night fisherman, I know that it's dark when you're out there. And you're night fishing, you're trying to catch fishes or whatever.
Night fishing for you is Walmart at 3 in the morning.
That's right. This is Van Camp's fish sticks.
That's right.
That's right, and frying them up.
I love that.
I know, it's delicious.
Right.
And so, with, maybe they're hiding.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a real possibility. Jesus isn't showing himself, so the other question is, what else is Jesus doing during this time?
Mhm.
Okay, which is
Yeah.
probably a whole nother
Yeah.
fascinating.
Don't ask the Mormons that
Yeah,
question.
yeah, exactly, cause he's in Pennsylvania somewhere. But I think that maybe they were hiding, cause I don't know if, yeah, they got one, but now there were others that followed him.
Mhm.
Maybe we pursued them. And then Peter's personality shows so heavily in all this, which is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think it shows a contrast between Peter and John. John can't even refer to himself as John in the book that he wrote.
Yeah.
And here he's vividly describing Peter and all of the things that he did. And he's
Yeah.
doing it in great detail by saying he ran into the tomb and he plunged into the water. I mean, he's using these sort of adjectives to describe, for the reader to get a real feel for who Peter was. And I think especially toward the end, John is really descriptive in that.
Yeah.
Because he wants people to know the sort of dynamo that Peter was, because that's gonna come out later, who he was and how important he became.
Mhm. But that'd be interesting that if, it just occurred to me while you were speaking that, what if Peter would have written the gospel? That'd have been neat. I don't know.
Say again, Ed?
What if Peter had written a gospel?
Oh, man.
How cool would that be? But it's not meant to be, but at the same time, we have his epistles. And
Yeah,
those
can you
are
imagine Peter's
dynamite.
perspective?
Yeah,
Peter's
that would have been
perspective
cool.
of things, that would have been very.
Would have been very cool, but
Yeah.
just for pure historical, you know. But anyway, what we do see is that Peter just lunges right into the sea there. Verse 8, but the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from land. And so the other disciples, the other 6, decided, okay, let's row this thing in, let's go see Jesus, but let's not just jump into the sea.
Somebody's
Okay?
gotta park the car.
Exactly, exactly. Not everyone can just run out of the car.
Drag her into the ditch, yeah.
Peter jumped out and drop tucked and rolled out.
Yes, he did.
Exactly.
He took off.
So they came in, I guess they weren't that far out, so they could hear Jesus, have this conversation. It says, for they were not far from land, but about 200 cubits, dragging the net with fish. So now they're dragging it. Remember, they can't bring it into the boat. So they have the water drag. They're rowing, as I can picture, as fast as they possibly can. But they got this enormous catch of fish, and they're with the water drag, and they're trying to fight that. But they're still trying to get this little boat over to shore, and they're dragging the net with fish. Keep in mind, though, that it's in the water, and they're able to drag this. They're dragging it. They can't possibly pick this thing up.
That's how the Lord blesses though.
Absolutely, absolutely.
When we let him bless, that's how he blesses.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then it always amazes us, which it always should, that
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
doesn't just bless with 1 or 2
No.
fish.
No, it's opened the floodgates.
Which shows that the Lord can go from 0 to 153 miles an hour like that.
Yeah. And keep in mind that Jesus had asked them, and obviously Jesus isn't concerned with food. I mean, verse 5 it says, do you have any food? He's not concerned with their food. He doesn't need their fish.
Right.
Okay, this is the point that he's going to bring out here. It says, then as soon as they had come, so they're dragging the net, they're still in the water. Then as soon as they had come, so now they were arrived to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid on it with bread. The Bible, it's just so subtle about
Right,
this.
it says it.
It just says it. And it's up to us to go back there and catch it. What's really going on here is Jesus is saying, I don't need your food. I don't need your food. You guys need my food. Never once in this story do you see him bringing up the fish that they caught, cooking it. And Jesus waiting for them to bring up the fish to cook it. Jesus is saying, I know you guys went fishing. I know you did. That's all wonderful. But you don't need to do that. I will supply your needs. I'm the one who can put bread and fish right there in the fire and have you guys taken care of while you guys go out and catch men and women, boys and girls, and bring them into the church. He's saying that's really what it's all about. And so just this very subtle, very, very subtle, the fact that Jesus was all, and where did he get the fish and bread? We don't know. It doesn't matter. Sometimes we ask ourselves that. How did I get out of that one? How did the Lord supply that? Where did that money come from? Where's it going to come from?
Right.
It doesn't say, but
Yeah.
Peter, obviously, did he get there before everybody else?
I don't know. It's
Yeah,
almost like
I
on,
don't know.
on Home Alone where, you know, she takes the bus home and everything, and she could have waited, she opened the door, and 2 seconds later her family did.
Yeah.
It's almost like, but that, see, none of that matters.
No, no.
And I know you know that, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's just his personality.
Yeah.
And we don't know if Peter arrived there, you know, sooner
That
or
wasn't the
not.
point. The point was that Peter.
He
Peter's
showed his personality.
showed-
Exactly.
Which is funny because it's possible the boat dragging fish could have passed Peter.
You could have.
Yeah.
And
could
then
have.
she was
Really,
like,
with
if I
his
had
coat
just
on.
stayed in the
Exactly.
boat, I
6
could've-
grown men, you know, one
Yeah.
holding on to the fish, you got some people rowing, but
But
They're
they must
laughing
not
at
have-
him as he
Yeah,
walks
Exactly.
like,
by.
Peter,
Yeah.
dude, you could have stayed in the boat.
Exactly.
That heavy coat's dragging him down, they're passing him up,
Yeah.
you know?
I thought in catching fish, you have to go way out there. Obviously,
maybe they were starting to slowly come
200
back
cubits.
in.
Back in.
Do we know what that
Yeah.
is then, 200 cubits?
I didn't look that up. It's a lot though, I would imagine. Well, 200
Says it
cubits.
was near.
It's 153 fish, I think, and they weren't small fish, they were big fish, like what Julie said, when God blesses, there's no doubt about it that he blesses.
These aren't goldfish.
Yeah, and these are not goldfish, these
Minnows.
are, they're not
Goldfish
minnows,
or the
guppies, or beta fish, they're big. And so he says that Jesus already had the coals of fire there, he had fish laid on, he had bread. And that's not lost on the disciples, by the way. That's a very passive hint, a very passive, subtle, in-your-face hint that you guys, you don't have to go back to your old ways. You don't have to go and try to make that, earn a living and that be your primary. Guys, that's not gonna be your primary. Your primary is gonna be catching people. And I will supply your food. Isn't that what he's told us to do? He doesn't say, go seek first the best job you can have and then everything else. He said, seek first the kingdom of God. And whatever I will bless you with is what you're gonna be blessed with. And there's gonna be hardships with that, and there's gonna be good times with that. He said, but seek first the kingdom. And that's what I got out of Brother Poon's message is, you know, he says people are dying without, with not knowing about the kingdom, or not putting it first. And that's what he was saying, yes.
You know, even if it was just for the moment, but, you know, Jesus had supplied their food up all throughout this time. And now, like Philip said, they're in this kind of this spiritual stupor,
Yeah.
not knowing how this is gonna work out. So like you said, even if it was just in the moment for the upfront, close-up need, we're hungry, let's go get some fish. Even if it was that, this lesson shows, I'll take care of you, you don't need to panic here. You know, even if it's just for this one meal right now to figure things out, you don't need to panic.
Yeah.
You know, if it wasn't for a whole career change is what I'm saying,
Yeah.
it was just in the moment, okay? Then even that, you don't need to
Even
panic.
that,
Right.
even that,
Right.
yeah. And even in this 50-day, you know, window of time.
Right.
Yeah, if it's a statement for their life or for right now,
Right now,
that's
yeah.
Jesus is
absolutely
still
right.
teaching them.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Still guiding and
Oh,
teaching
yeah.
them.
And Sister Julie found the
Oh.
cubit.
Cubic's 18 inches.
oh, okay, oh, yeah, that's right, they say between your,
Your top of your finger to your.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
cubit, 18 inches, 300 feet, that's a football field.
So that's not that far.
oh,
then.
okay.
So far
No, I
out.
mean, that's far enough to where you could see somebody,
Right,
they're
yeah.
smaller, but.
But not to know maybe who it
Exactly.
was.
Couldn't
Yeah.
get them out.
And it's dark.
And it's dark,
Yeah, it's-
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, but see, I love this though. Even though Jesus has that fish and it's laid there and he's got bread and it's him, right? He's not negating what they bring to the table either though. And I love that. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish which you have just caught. Who knows if they even cooked it or not? But see, he's incorporating their efforts as well. And I love that part. It's not all about Jesus, right? It's not like, hey, you guys have to do nothing here. Never in the Bible where you find that. It's about a co-communion, right? And so what we find is that Jesus says, bring some of the fish that you just caught. Do we know that they cooked them? Do we know that they needed them? Doesn't say. But we do know that they ate together. Now maybe they cooked them, maybe they didn't. But Jesus, the point is has already with a miracle supplied the fish and the bread. And so, but I love the fact that he incorporates what they're doing for him too. So it's not just one-sided. So Simon, and I love this. This is our final act of Peter and his passion that we see before Jesus has a conversation with him, Jesus says, he gives a command and says, bring some of the fish which you have just caught. Who's the one that goes out there and does that? By himself. Remember, it took 6 men to row this onto shore in the water. Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land, full
After-
of large fish.
After he just swam a football field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we can't,
Adrenaline.
exactly, if we can't see that Peter is still in love with the Lord, if we can't see that he's got bursting energy, bursting passion, then we might want to reread these scriptures again and put them together.
And after fishing all night.
Exactly. He's not letting anything stop him. And so when he gave the command, I'll do it. I see the Lord on the shore, I'm gonna jump in. Hey, Jesus is over there in the tomb, I'm gonna run to him. He's been first in everything. Does that fit his personality? Absolutely. So we wouldn't expect anything less. Unless you say, well, what about when he denied him 3 times? Wasn't he gonna, take a hit for that? Isn't he gonna take a hit for that? Oh, he takes a hit for that. But it's not a hit that it disrupts his core.
That goes along with his personality.
It goes with his personality, but when we get hit, do we let it disrupt our core? Or do we say, Lord, this is a hit, but it's a flesh wound.
Not gonna knock me out.
It's not gonna knock me out. And that wound sometimes can go pretty deep. But are we gonna let it knock us out? And so that wound for Peter, when he didn't just cry that night, but he wept bitterly. Did he let him knock it out? He didn't let it knock him out. And so we see here that it was Simon Peter that went up and dragged the net to land full of large fish, 153, and although there were so many, the net was not broken. Like Julie said, she nailed it. I mean, when the Lord blesses, he makes no mistake about letting you know that it was him. And if that means getting down to the 11th hour in 59 minutes,
A lot of times it is.
and a lot of times it is. And the only way that you could possibly, now that little thing you had in the back of your mind, like, well, I still got that. No, that's gone too, right? But then it could only be of the Lord. And I love that. I don't like it in the time, but you like it when you're out of it. That's the way I look at it.
I always refer to the Red Sea. There was no escape. Remember our study?
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
They were in that wadi, that canyon. They couldn't go to the left or the right. When they came out on the Nueva Beach, now it's rocky cliffs on either side. You couldn't escape along the beach. There was
You couldn't go
nowhere
back.
to go.
Yeah.
That's what he led them to.
Yeah. There's only one way, that's forward.
Yeah.
And I think in spite of that, because our attempt is to make sure you get you again next week apparently.
No.
I think Pastor Nick inspired last night.
Nice.
You're right.
Let's go out with a bang.
Yeah, he was,
Yeah,
he was,
that's right.
he was talking to the chips. Anyway, so what I think in spite of all that, his exuberance, his energy, his excitement, adrenaline, in spite of that, the Lord still needed to reset him,
Oh, yeah.
right? And
Yep.
so, like, he wanted that energy and passion, that unbridled, desire that he had for the Lord. I don't think there's any doubt that Peter had that, because he showed that.
Oh, yeah.
But he needed to reset it, reset it, and look him in the eye, because the last time he really looked him in the eye was right after that third denial,
Yep.
right? And so he didn't have one-on-one time with him.
No.
He had that one-on-one moment as the rooster was crowing, not any time since.
Yeah.
There's no record of a one-on-one conversation until this moment.
Yeah.
And so I think he needed to reset Peter and get him, take that passion and energy and direct it appropriately by resetting.
Yeah, and Peter had always had that passion. He'd always had that. It was evident in the Gospels. It was evident that if you read, I put all the Gospels together, and every encounter that Peter's name is mentioned, it's usually something that he's just sticking out in, or going forward, or whatever, sticking his foot in his mouth sometimes, or boldly proclaiming that he's the Christ. I mean, we see all that passion. So is it any wonder that he still has that passion? What I'm trying to say is that, that denying him didn't affect his core. And that's really what I'm getting out of this, is that yes, it set him back, and yes, he needed to be dealt with. And as the great surgeon, as Jesus is, knows how to mend our hearts, He knew exactly what Peter needed that night. And so, Jesus, verse 13, well, actually in verse 12, he says, Jesus said to them, come and eat breakfast. I think this is where come and dine, in the old King James comes from.
I have to sing that this morning.
Yeah, well, we have a slot right here.
There you go.
So he says, come and eat breakfast. Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you, knowing that it was the Lord. And who else could it be? It's just they just didn't talk about it. You know, he didn't have to show his palms or his feet or his side or anything like that again.
Right.
So they knew who he was. They knew that only he could have done these things. And so he says, Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. And so now it's Jesus handing out and supplying their needs. And I think this is more physical, of course, but it's also metaphorical. It's a thing where Jesus is saying, look, I'm supplying your fish, I'm supplying your bread. You guys get back out there. And not go fishing, but get back out there in the field of the ministry. Verse 14 says, this is now the third time Jesus showed himself to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. We already talked about the 2 times in chapter 20. This is now the third time. So, and I picture this thing, you know, they didn't really want to ask him, so now there's this, I'm not going to say awkward pause, but you kind of see, you kind of get the feeling that he wasn't really out there with, I don't picture there's a lot of talking right now. I think this is kind of a serious moment. And I think that all 7 of them are around the fire, and I think they're all kind of having a moment. And I think that Peter, now, if there could be an elephant in the room, it'd be the fact that he denied him. And like Philip said, it hadn't been dealt with.
Right.
He hasn't been dealt with.
Yeah. You know how I kind of picture this is I picture they're all sitting there, and Jesus then just turns to Peter, who I think is sitting right there.
Yeah.
I think he's right next to him.
Yeah.
And I picture sort of camera 2, right, like different angle. So camera, like Jesus then looks over at him, and now here we go. Here's the moment where he's gonna rewind Peter, reset him, and put him on the path that would eventually lead to his death.
Yeah.
But this was the very beginning of it, and so I see him looking directly at him.
Oh, sure.
And they're face to face, eye to eye, right there, one on one.
And the other disciples just back and forth, like a ping pong
Kind of holding
match.
their breath.
Yeah, like what's going on? They knew that he denied him. I mean, how could they not? John was literally right there, and they knew that. And so I pictured that there's kind of a lull in the conversation, and it's kind of a serious moment. And so when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? He could have been talking about the fish that he dragged up that were sitting right there. He could have been talking about the disciples. He could have been talking about anything. It didn't really matter. Do you love anything more than me is what he's asking. And so let's read our the rest of 15. He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. So just to boil this all down, the pastor's the resident expert on this. But for my understanding, so I can understand this a little bit better, there's 2 types of love here. The English does not bring this out, unfortunately. But we have different descriptive words that we can put in front of it. What Jesus is asking, and it just, if you boil it all down, do you truly love me? Peter is saying, do you have the kind of, Jesus is asking him, do you have the kind of love that is more than just your average love? Do you truly love me? This is the way that I saw it brought out. Truly love me.
Was that the agape love?
The agape, then you have the phileo. So Peter responds in like, and I'll keep it in English for today. Peter responds, yes, I have affection for you. I have the kind of love that is affectionate. Yes, I love you, but it's not truly love. See, there's a difference here. Peter had been using superlatives. What are superlatives? I will never deny you. That will never happen to you. See what I'm saying? And what else did he say? He said, you will never wash my feet. He's not just going He's not doing this. Oh no. He's doing, this kind of passion. This kind of passion is what he's doing. He's not just saying, I won't do that. I will never do that. You'll never wash my feet. Not my head, not my feet only, but my whole body, as it were. Isn't that what he's saying? He'd been using superlatives and big language the whole time of Jesus' ministry. The whole time. Never. Not just, Lord, I don't want you to wash my feet. You'll never wash my feet. Remember that? And what else does he say? Jesus says, tonight you're going to deny me 3 times. I'll never do that. We're seeing a broken man. He can't rise up to Jesus' language. That's what's going on. He can't without a doubt say, Lord, I truly love you. Why? Because he's broken. He's contrite now. He's been put in his place. He understood the last time he did this kind of effort, he got the beat down 3 times. And the beat down came from himself. He can't rise up to talk about the true love that Jesus is asking him. Do you truly love me? Do you superlatively love me? He's saying, I have affection for you. I can't do that because I don't know myself. And so he says, feed my lambs. I'm not giving up on you. Verse 16 says, he said to him a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? By the way, you know else what's going on here? He's not calling him Peter. He's not calling him Simon Peter. What did he say there in early John? Let's just go back here just for a sec. I'll just read it if you don't want to turn. This is fine. Save time. So chapter 1, verse 40. One of the 2 who had heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, we have found the Messiah, which is translated the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Now he's bringing Simon Peter to Jesus. And when Jesus looked at him, he said, you are Simon, the son of Jonah. He addressed him as he's been known up to this point. You shall be called Cephas. He gave him a new name. What did we talk about? He's resetting his life. He's going back to the original name that he had before he met him. He's not talking about Peter, not referencing that. He's calling him the name of when he met him. He's bringing him all the way back.
Because that's how he's feeling.
Exactly. Peter needs to be reset. And when we talk about reset, we're not talking about let's just go down the road a little bit. We're talking about let's go all the way back to the beginning. I'm not even calling you the name I gave you. See, that's what he's doing. He's not calling him that. So he says, Simon, son of Jonah. He says, do you love me? This is the second in verse 16. He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And you can just tell that the energy Peter put it into jumping into the sea, and the energy he put into dragging up the fish, and the energy he had running to the tomb. It's almost like he's trying to make up for that denial. He can't say he truly loves the Lord. He can't and he won't say with absolute terms. See, Peter spoke in absolute terms. That he truly loves Jesus. Instead, he says, yes, I have affection for you, and defers to Jesus' complete knowledge. What did he not do the entire time he was in the Gospels? He didn't defer to Jesus' complete knowledge. Are you kidding me? He battled him at every corner, at every turn. He sees the other disciples getting just their feet washed. Oh, that's not good enough for him. Well, apparently it was good enough. Now it's not good enough. You mean I'm going to deny you? No, I'm not. What else? What else? There's lots of times that he just, Lord, Jesus said, I'm going to be crucified at the hands of the Pharisees. No, you're not. Wait a minute. Who's really in control here? Well, apparently Peter is. He thinks, but he's not really in control. Jesus has to tell him, I'm in control, Peter. I'm in control. I got you to the point where you can't superlatively talk to me anymore. I truly love you. I will never, he's not using those words. Yes, Lord, you know I love you. You know I have affection for you. and we see a broken man give something.
Every one of us here would say we love the Lord, right? But if you were to ask every one of us, just point and ask the question, would you ever deny the Lord? Because of this, we could never bring ourselves to say that. Okay, this is a model here. You know, Brian was in the military, he knows that in order to forge a unit, you have to break them down, like what you're saying. You have to break them down to listen to the commander without question. And so, this is what he's doing. If he's gonna be a leader, then he has to be, first of all, a total follower.
Exactly. And he's a leader, but he also needs to be a follower. And who else noticed the fact that Peter was always butting heads, as it were, with Jesus' knowledge? The other disciples. If you have somebody in your office or somebody on a team or whatever that's constantly conflicting with the coach or I sat in a meeting one time where I had a fellow employee completely going against the boss. I thought, we were all just stunned, what's going on here? Well, later on that play got written out, but that's the thing is, you do a double take, what's going on here? If they're questioning their authority, what are they gonna do about it? How are they gonna respond to that? In the end, the disciples knew that Jesus won. Jesus won. It wasn't Peter was right. It was Peter was wrong when he went against Jesus. And so he can't and he won't say with absolute terms that he truly loves Jesus. He has to say he has affection for him. Any person who studies the Gospels know that he hasn't shown this type of humility. This is a broken man. And only Jesus knows how to surgically repair his soul. This is somebody who God has finally gotten his attention. He's a broken, contrite man, a man who's finally in a place where he can listen to and not jump up with another superlative. He's not jumping up with superlative. He's done with that. That's what happens when you deny the Lord 3 times, and it would happen to us. Would we have the energy and the confidence to do that? I don't think so. Our confidence would take a hit. And so that's what's really, in the English to Greek here is really what's going on. But the Lord doesn't give up on him. He says, tend my sheep. Verse 17, he said to him the 3rd time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And Jesus, by the way, uses the same word every single time. Do you truly love me? He asked him 3 times in that same Greek word. Peter was grieved because he said to him the 3rd time, do you truly love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. Just that sentence right there is uncharacteristic of Peter.
Very humble.
Very humble. Very humble. Had he applied that sentence to the other times in the Gospels, you'd see a different person. He didn't. Lord, I know all things. How dare you say I'm not going to deny you? Right? How dare you say you're going to be crucified? I know those things better than you do. How can you have a follower of Christ if you're not willing to listen to his leading? You have to. And so here's Peter saying, Lord, you know all things. How did he learn that? By denying him 3 times when Jesus predicted it? By that look that Jesus gave him just after he did it? Do you think that cemented it in for him? I saw that. That's what he said. I saw that. And I'm sorry that it happened. Called it, He's not braggadocious, nothing. Jesus is saying, look, you should have just listened. Don't be jumping out ahead of me. Come back and follow me. And this is how we're going to work. And this is how 1 Peter gets written. 2 Peter, in Acts. It doesn't get written by someone who doesn't follow. He follows. And so here in verse 18, well, he says, Lord, you know all things, you know that I love you. And by the way, that's still, this have affection for him. He never does go back up to the true. Not at this time.
You're right. I'm just going to say that Jesus, in his mercy now, responding to Peter's, deflated ego right now, uses now this 3rd time the same word that Peter's been using. I mean, do you have affection for him? So let's just talk about that.
Yeah. So he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, in the days that prior up to this moment. He says, you girded yourself and you walked where you wished. You did your own thing, and that's fine. But when you're old, from this point on now that I've restored you, I've put you back. You denied me 3 times, I've asked you these 3 times. I put you back. I said, I called you by that name that I called you initially, and now before I made you Peter, I've called you, we're resetting everything. He's saying from this point on, when you're old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you did not wish. It says this he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. He's saying, I hear you. You said that you love me. I see you, what you're doing for me, and how you have energy and how you have passion and all that stuff. I see it. And now that you've professed following me, this is where it's going to take you. It's going to take you to the road that you don't want to go. It's going to take you to that, it's the cross. That's what it says. Stretching out your hands, and that's really what he meant. He says that another is going to carry you where you don't want to go. You want to sign up for this life, he says, that's going to be your lot. That was good enough for Peter, and it ended up being good enough for Peter. It says this he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God, and when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me. It's a complete reset. What did he say to the apostles on the seashore to come, or at the tax office, and what did he say to get them to come follow him? Or to get them out of their chairs or off the boat or whatever? Follow me. It's a complete reset. It's like he's meeting him for the first time. He had to do this to repair his soul. He had to do it. So Peter had sunk so low that he had to be reset, and this is exactly what we see. He said, follow me. Just those 2 simple words that got all those men off the seashore, out of the tax office, Luke out of his, the other apostles, and away from their father on the boat, and away from their lives. Just follow me. So Peter, I think, understood at that moment, I'm not going back. This is something I want. I feel restored. It says, then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved. Of course, this is John. Following. I think he was right there. Or maybe that Jesus, he had gone off, I really think that all the rest of the disciples on purpose heard this, by the way, though. But he looks at John, and he says, who also had leaned on his breast at the supper and said, Lord, who is the one who betrays you? So John's correlating himself. Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, but Lord, what about this man? Is he going to die for you too? He wants to know about John now, because John and he had been very close. What about John? You told me how I'm going to die. You told me what I'm going to suffer. What about John? It's none of his business.
Back to the old Peter.
Exactly. He's still the same person. He's restored. Praise the Lord. But he's still the same person. He says, what about this man? 22, he says, Jesus said to him, if I desire that he remain until I come back, why do you care? You just follow me. Isn't that what he's saying? He's saying, if I desire that he, and we know it now is 2,000 years plus, if I want him to live, not die, because he said Peter was going to die, live for 2,000 plus years, why should you care about that? You focus on you, Peter. Don't worry about anybody else. You need to focus on you. He says, if I will that he remained until I come, that would be a while, right? What is that to you? You follow me. Then this saying went out among the brethren that this disciple, John, would not die. It just wouldn't die. Right? Because Peter's talking about his death. Well, what about him? I'm going to die for you, Lord. What about John? That's between me and John, Peter. Don't worry about it. Do we worry about each other and how we're going to? Yeah, we do, but ultimately it's us and the Lord, right?
Here again, he's saying, look, I'm in control of your life.
Exactly.
Okay? If I want to, I just predicted how you're going to die. I'm in control of your life.
Yeah.
And I'm in control of his life. If I wanted to live forever, I'll do that. I'm in control of your lives.
Right.
That's what he said.
Well, and again, he's telling him, let's reset, again, the reset.
Yeah.
He's saying, follow me.
Yeah, he is.
On now, he
That's
says
true.
it again, you follow me, don't look around,
Yeah.
don't be horizontal, or, don't be horizontal, be vertical. You worry about Peter, you worry about me. And again, and I think this puts, I'm sorry, you're not there yet, but I think this puts the emphasis back on, no, you already read it, till I come. He's
Right.
putting the emphasis back on his return and the kingdom.
Yeah.
So that's what he's saying, not, just don't worry about it till he dies, or don't worry about anything. This goes back to occupy or do business till I come. So this message is part of the sort of secondary effect of this, which is, don't worry about this stuff, you keep working until I come back.
Yeah, and he had just said, follow me, he has to tell him again, follow me.
Follow me, it's twice.
It's twice. So the saying went out that John wouldn't die. He says, but yet Jesus did not say to him that he wouldn't die, but if I desire that he remain till I come, what is that to you? And he's just saying, don't worry about it. He's not saying John's gonna live until Jesus comes back, which by the way, I think is having to do with the revelation that John was able to see, but that's, it's not what he's talking about. Peter shouldn't worry about that. It says that this is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things, and now, and we know that his testimony is true. And there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Amen. It's just a snippet of what John wrote. It's just very, very thankful that John did write what he wrote down, for us to, because he includes a lot of the other semantic, I don't know that word, Gospels, the others that just kind of follow. Synoptic, thank you. Synoptic Gospels kind of just follow like, this is this, and that. He kind of goes in between the lines and says, no one else includes John 14, 15, and 16. Or I'm sorry, 15, 16, that whole sermon that Jesus had with his disciples. No one else covers that. No one else covers in 17 when Jesus is praying just to himself. No one else covers John 21 when Peter is restored by Jesus. So we see a lot of good things in John. And the other things are necessary too, but I got a lot out of it. I hope that you did. I appreciate your patience. It's been almost a year, so looking forward to what the pastor has next week. So
We tried.
probably like Fred, yeah.
We tried to help you out.
Yeah, we tried, everyone commented, we tried to get it one more week,
It was
but,
Not gonna happen.
but you were determined.
It didn't seem like it was that long.
Good. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Wow, a year?
Well, I guess maybe not. I think January.
Okay, maybe 4 months.
4 months, okay. All right, let's go ahead and